Woof woof and namaste. This is Hill Dog and welcome to Kanha Cast, a series of conversations with visitors and residents of Kanha Shantivanam, the International Center for Heartfulness. Today I will be speaking to Dan Hansen. Dan is a memory expert and an author. He's also a heartfulness meditation trainer, and he's someone who I've always admired for his approach to spirituality. For those of you who don't know, heartfulness is a meditation technique that is offered for free by volunteer trainers around the world. It was earlier known by the name Sehaj Marg, or the natural path. One of the specialities of heartfulness is meditation with the transmission of a very subtle energy. Since there will be a lot of reference to heartfulness in this talk, let me just fill you in on the heartfulness guides. The first guide was Lalaji, then there was Babuji. From 1983 to 2014, Chariji was the heartfulness guide, and from 2014 to the present day, Daji has been the heartfulness guide. You will also hear the word master very often in this talk. Master can refer both to the heartfulness guide or to the inner master or higher self that is within us and all around us. This definition depends on the individual and his journey, and it may differ from time to time. So we're here with Dan, and Dan, the way we've been doing these conversations is, we get into an introduction, because usually I know very little about the person I'm interviewing. But in your case, of course, I know you from a long time. Dan and I go back a long time, actually. I don't know if you remember, but we once shared a hotel room in Rudrapur. I don't know how long back that was. That was really a long time ago. Some hotel in Rudrapur, and we shared a hotel room. But our association has been with heartfulness, basically. It's heartfulness that brings us together.
Yeah, definitely.
And I don't know much about your life outside heartfulness. I don't know much about, what you do and stuff like that. So for our listeners, could you tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, first I'll talk a little about my past, because I actually feel like I have lived two lives in one life. My first life was before the journey, before I met Charity, the previous master, right? And that drastically changed my life. Before that, I was very active in politics. I was a candidate for the European Parliament when I met him the first time. And I'm an economist by education, so I have an academic background. My approach to life was also very practical. So I'm not grown up with any kind of religion or spirituality or any belief system.
So where did you grow up then? Where were you?
I'm grown up in a small village in South Denmark near the German border. At some stage in that journey, I started wondering what they are not telling me about in this life here. Because I knew there's something more than this we can grab and feel. There's something behind. But I didn't know, nobody spoke about it, and I didn't know how to ask for it. And even if I had known what to ask, there would have been nobody who could have told me anything. So in the beginning, I had a little superficial journey, but quite dedicated, actually, journey, trying to find out what this diffuse thing was. So I researched a lot on UFOs. I must have been 10 or 11 years old, right? I researched on UFOs and Pyramid Force and Loch Ness Monster and
Area 51, all that.
Yeah, all those things that people thought that was a little mystical or magical. And it's definitely, you get in contact with that wonder about life, right? So in the beginning, that was the journey that, if I'm looking back, I can see that's what I was searching for. But I got into politics because of my family also. My samskaras was like that. So I was very active for 25 years until my heart couldn't do it anymore. It was tough, right? I'm sure any politician will also sign to that statement. And my heart couldn't do it. So I had to find another way. But it was also Charity who kind of, I don't know if he pulled me out in the neck or in the ear from it. Even every time I asked him, he said, stay in politics because that's what you're good at. Several times I asked him. So it was something that finished inside myself, which I had a really big respect for. Because in the beginning, when I started, I was very thorough in checking value systems. Mm-hmm. Because I was in politics, I didn't believe any spoken word, frankly. I might still not do that, actually. Because I've heard all the napkin speeches, right? Where people, they will say all the nice things. We should share, the world should be happy, peaceful, everybody's equal. Then you go in the food line and they will push up front and they'll eat whatever food is there and leave everybody else empty-handed, right?
Everybody's equal, but some are more equal than others.
That's what I call a napkin speech, right? It's quickly written, it's all the right words, but there's no content in it really, right? Sure. So, but I believe in behavior. I believe how people, they behave. That's how I evaluate a situation, right? Of course, in the beginning, you have to take the words, but you easily find out if that's real. I mean, do you walk the talk or don't you? I mean, so it's much easier to talk than to walk, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'm also like that.
So you mentioned you got into politics because of the family, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
And was there any other motivation to be in politics? And
I mean, the spiritual journey and the political journey, it's rooted in the same motivation. It's about creating a better world and create a better version of yourself and other people. I mean, it's the same driving force that is behind. But somehow my world, it was broken in two halves literally, because people in politics, they didn't think much of people in spirituality, and people in spirituality in general didn't think much of politicians. So if I invited for parties or stuff like that, I mean, maybe if there were 100 people, 50 were in spirituality, 50 were in politics, and they didn't mix also, right?
Those must have been odd parties.
I wondered, Rudy, I really wondered about it, right?
Yeah.
How come my life is like that, where it's broken up in two halves? And then at some stage, after 4 years of campaigning, I just burned out in politics. I mean, the experiences there was heartbreaking in many cases, right? So I simply couldn't continue.
So you mentioned the motivation was similar, and the motivation is, of course, to help people, to make a difference, to make a change. Did you find that conventional politics wasn't being able to do that?
It is definitely doing it on a economic and a practical level, right? Obviously, politics matters a lot when it comes to that. But you make laws because people break them, right? It would be better if it was not needed to make the laws in the first place, that people by character or moral, they just followed the right aspect, right? But since many of us are greedy or predators, whichever word we found more correct, we'll try to exploit some situations. And that's why you have to create rules and also distribute wealth for that matter, right? And now we see situations around in the world, right? How big nations, they're trying to dominate weaker nations.
Sure.
And that's, of course, an ongoing, more or less visible journey that goes on the whole time, right? I think everybody knows that. But I wanted, to make a change, right? I wanted to leave this world in a better place than when I came. I wanted to contribute to that. So in the very beginning, the reason I started in politics was actually because of environment. But now we are talking 35 years back, right? Mm-hmm. That I realized at that time it's completely unbalanced the way we are living. And we cannot keep exploiting nature and animals in the way that we are doing. But there was not that much understanding at that time. So very fast I got into international politics, because very fast I also realized environment is not a national issue.
Sure, it affects all of us.
Yeah, if you pollute, it will drift somewhere else. If you create greenhouse effect, it's not a national issue, right? Mm-hmm. Atomic nuclear, I mean, we had a big nuclear power plant near Copenhagen, which was built in Sweden. And they put it just up against the neighboring country's capital, right? Something that would never have happened if you had had proper international cooperation, I would think. So there were so many examples where it was quite clear it can be handled on a national level.
Sure.
But it's like that in many fields also when it comes to crime, right? Or wars and refugees. And I mean, it's not a national issue. It becomes a global issue.
Absolutely.
Poverty is a global issue, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, was there any particular one time in politics where you thought that this isn't for me, or was it a feeling that grew over time?
If there were any specific situation where I said, this is not going to work,
Yeah. Or was it just something that over time your experience told you that this is not the place for me?
there was a moment. You see, I really respect politicians. I mean, in Denmark, where I come from, and the Europeans I had in contact with, in different countries, it's different behaviors, right? Some places there are a lot of bribes and killings, or I mean, extortion. I don't see that at all in Denmark,
I don't
frankly.
know what you're talking about.
So, but it's good to understand that in Denmark, where I grew up, politics is not. It's a jungle, right? The strong wins, right? It's the
Sure.
jungle law, and it is a kind of a war for power, right? But you don't have the physical expression as you see in some other countries.
Yeah.
And
It's a
so it is
battle
a
of
little,
ideas more.
it's a little innocent, I would say.
Ah.
So all the people that I grew up with, and I mean the youngsters I spend my time with now, they're prime minister and different, whole different ministerial posts, right? So the party I supported in those days, I guess still I do. They're in government now, right? So if I had walked that path, if my heart had made it possible, I might also have been minister today. Who knows how things would have panned out. So there was one incident after I was candidate for 4 years, right? And I remember there was party congress where a couple of thousand of the topmost active people in the party were there, right? So that meant you had the prime minister and all the big ministerial posts. You had a lot of, I mean, our party, we ruled all the big cities, right? So there were a lot of mayors, all the big unions, the leaders are also supporting this party, right? So there was a huge power base of the country. They were there present in that one room, right? And at some stage, I was also there as a participant, right? At some stage, I decided to go on the back benches, and I climbed up, and I was just sitting and looking out over the audience, a couple of thousand people, maybe, right? And then I started with the prime minister, and maybe I was around 30 in those days, and average age was maybe in the 50s, let's say. And I thought, who would you like to be like in 20 years? In average, if I look around, who would you like to be like? So I started with the prime minister. I mean, I felt, no, but that I could not resonate with that being, you could say, right? And like that, I went through all the people, all the known people, you know, from the medias, and I just, the feeling of what kind of person to be, I could not recognize any of them. I could not see any of them as a role model on a human level. Definitely on a political level, you could say, and with the power they had and the difference they did. But as a human, I could not see.
Wow.
Yeah, that was quite a revelation for me. And that's also when I kind of decided, okay, this is not the route. I mean, I could have continued, right? I was offered seats in the national parliament and jobs in the union and all that. But my heart couldn't do it. I couldn't simply do it.
Wow. And this idea of helping people and making a change, why do you think people go so wrong? I mean, the whole world thinks of politicians as, self-serving and people after power. Why do you think that happens to people? Where does the innocence and the egalitarianism and the, sort of philanthropy go?
See, now I'm going to be a little harsh on the Western societies, how we have structured them. Because in my idea, nearly every value we strive for in the West is opposing spirituality. It's like you want to be known, right? You want to be world famous. Your ego wants to be seen and cherished, right? You want to be rich and powerful. And very often it isolates you from other people, right? And makes you selfish also on the route. It's about enjoyment, sex, drugs, rock and roll. And it's not much about, in my idea, it's not much about moral and values and character formation. It's about the enjoyment, right? And getting the most out of your life. And it's about money and career. And I don't see really any of these in itself being a goal. And I definitely feel that it's opposing the spiritual journey in so many ways. So I feel the foundation is not, it's not conducive for a harmonious world, I feel, because it's individualistic, right? It's centered around the individual that want to get the most out of it. And that there's obviously a lot of conflicting interest the whole time, right?
Well,
in Denmark, they're pretty good at it, balancing it, in my idea, right? We have that Scandinavian welfare system where a couple of really important things has been decided. For instance, that education is free. That means that not depending on your parents' income or wallet or your own ability to borrow money, for that matter, is deciding your future. But that you can educate yourself and you can survive for the money that you get actually from the government in the period where you're studying. And it's wonderful in the sense that it's built on your willingness and your skills instead of your financial capacity.
Or your family background or any of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
That Denmark regularly rates as one of the happiest countries. Also, they have that rating. I don't know how they measure it.
Yeah, I saw they just came out with 2022, and Denmark is second this year, it seems.
Yeah, second to whom?
Finland. No, but all those
Scandinavia is
Iceland is third. Those Scandinavian welfare states, and Norway and Sweden is 7 or 8. I mean, they're all in the top 10, those countries.
So why do you think that is? Why do you think what has Scandinavia got right in that sense? Because they're always, Denmark's rated as one of the best places to live, one of the safest places to live, one of the happiest places to be. What are they doing right?
It's a combination of many things, obviously. But I think, with my political background, I would say that the labor movements were quite strong in those areas. So a lot of solidarity was created. Mm-hmm. So one philosopher, he once put it, Denmark is a country with very few too rich and even less too poor. Mm. And that is put beautifully with the distribution of wealth, right? And the distribution of wealth, if that is equal, the opportunities are also equal. Like we talk education, for instance,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Or if you get sick, right, how will you manage? I mean, will you, or there are so many kids, they don't get proper nourishment in their upbringing and they get slight brain damages, right? And they will not have the capacity for the rest of their life to lift themselves to their full potential as they were given by birth, right? So in Denmark, the distribution is relatively even. And some won't like it, of course, right? But if you're a relatively small country where there's a solidarity around the state, right, and where people are not just there for grabbing, right. Mm-hmm. Now I'm putting this in brackets, right, because Denmark is just half size of Hyderabad, right.
Sure. It's really
population-wise, right.
Population-wise, is
less than 6 million, right. So in India, to have the solidarity with the whole country is difficult, right.
Sure, it's such a vast country.
Exactly. Yeah. So when I'm telling this, it might not be a solution for a bigger country or a medium-sized country. Mm-hmm. That's just what I'm putting in brackets here at the same time, right? But the distribution matters a lot, and that we are one tribe, if I should put it a little funnily.
Nice.
That we are not that different, right? Now, of course, since the 60s, 70s, a lot of foreign workers has come, and their children and grandchildren also growing up. That creates some frictions. But basically, we are one tribe, and we trust the government and support the tax payment. So that means that we can finance so many things. In general, it means that the 90% richest, they pay to the 90% poorest. Wow. If you understand that.
Yes.
That means 80% are paying to themselves, right?
Yeah.
The very rich, they might not get the amount of benefits they're paying for, right? The very poor, they won't pay much, but still they'll get the benefits. But there'll be a kind of a solidarity around the whole system, right? Because the way that it is structured.
Yes.
You give, but you also get. And you can see the benefit. It's like an insurance, right?
So people are not that distrustful of the government either.
I mean, in general, I think people believe in the government. Obviously, during COVID, there has been a lot of different trends, right?
That's been an upheaval all over the world, actually. So a lot of things have gone, upside down.
Because it's a small country, and I'm talking politically, but there are other levels to talk also, right? Because it's a small country, it's relatively easy to get political influence also.
Sure.
And that means people, they consider the political system as something to be strived towards against being against it just, right? Because you just need 2% of the votes, and then you can actually get a seat in the parliament, actually 4 you'll get, right? Some big countries, you have to get 5%, and that's so many votes that it's nearly impossible, right? But it's supporting the democratic understanding, right, that the parliamentarism is the way to change things, right? Not by Naxaliting or Maoisting some areas and fighting against people and killing and whatnot.
True. So, in your career as a politician, which was going on, then side by side, you were also interested in stuff that wasn't visible. The political world is, of course, the visible world around us. But stuff that is not visible. You mentioned looking out at UFO listings and things like that, and checking that sort of stuff out. When did that start? That started right in childhood, or?
Yeah, I remember some. I had some experiences in a very, very young age, but a more consistent search started maybe around 10 or 11 years old. And I had an experience as 11-year-old that I forgot all about until 20 years later. But it was basically the first school class we had in geography. We were told there's no class today, you just look in the map. And I was sitting and flipping this book with all the countries, and it was just shapes and names and Kuala Lumpur and Kenya. I couldn't make any sense of it, right? It was just shapes and colors. But suddenly on one page, maybe mid in the book, there was a shape, and I was completely drawn to it. It was literally magnetic. And there was one city that I was sucked into, I would say. And I told my friends, we should go here. And they said, why? I said, we can sleep there. And I could hear my own words coming out. I could hear that makes no sense, right? I can sleep here also. And it was Chennai. The country was India and the city was Chennai, right? And nobody had spoken about India in my family. Nobody had spoken to me about it, and then I was sitting and brooding, when can I go there? Can I go in 10 years when I'm 21? How much will it cost? Or will I have to be 31 before I can go? How much money will I have? How much will it cost? And then I kind of forgot everything about it until maybe a couple of years of practice, because I ended up starting as 31-year-old, and I went to Chennai the first time as 31-year-old.
So exactly 20 years after that
it was exactly 20 years after, and Charity has written and spoken about that, I think Barbara maybe also, that many times they put the spiritual seed in us 20 years earlier, but it takes 20 years for it to sprout.
Wow.
Maybe Barbara, he was in Denmark at that time, or maybe he just transmitted at that time to Denmark. But something, when the receptive souls, right, they will somehow pick it up, right? And then it was just lying and working from inside, maybe, right? See, my life as a politician was, seen from outside, it was like one big, beautiful balloon, right? Lots of colors and ribbons and lights, and it was so flashy, right? It looked so nice. And the balloon was just getting bigger and bigger, being known and getting married with a beautiful woman and all these things, earning a lot of money and being famous, and everybody seemed to like you. All those things, it was just a big, big balloon that was growing and growing, right? And the more it grew, the more hollow I became inside. the more emptiness I felt inside. Because it just felt like the outer surface, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing inside. So that longing was there, right? And it's actually when I was in the middle of the campaign politically, when one day I put my hand on my heart and I couldn't feel it. It was dead. It was cold. Intuitively, I have always somehow known, I don't know from where, that it had to come through the heart. Whatever it was, it had to come through the heart. And I was so sad when I realized this thing with the heart. And then there was an inner dialogue. I mean, there was another little voice that said, but what to do?
Mm-hmm.
And again, the first voice came back and said, I don't know. And in those days, I was experimenting with a lot of spiritual thoughts. That was, and I had read in some of the books. I was following some Christian mystic group there, and they had read that at bedtime you can send up prayer to God and ask for. If it's a real wish from the heart, you can ask, right? See, I didn't believe in God. I'm not grown up with people in my family believing or talking about religion or spirituality or anything with belief. So I didn't know anything about prayer or God or anything, right? So I thought, but it can't harm anything also, right? If there's no God and you pray, if prayer doesn't work, also doesn't harm anything, right? So I desperately prayed for 3 nights, actually. If there's anything out there, please show yourself. And then I kind of forgot about it. Then I think a couple of weeks later, I met my aunt, and she was talking about meditation. I had tried it before, and it was a little scary for me because I had felt so much change was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So much that I could not fit in the role I was put in at that time, right? My whole life had to dissolve and disappear. So I got scared about that, but I called it boring, right? Because no man will admit fear, right? So I was not much interested. And then she said, on divine light in the heart. I said, what? Divine light in the heart. She said, I want to try that immediately. I said. And then a week later, I think I was introduced. And knowing myself those days, I would not have given myself 1 week in heartfulness. If I had looked at myself, that fellow won't last, no chance.
I guess the guys around you probably felt the same.
I'm sure some liked that suddenly they had a politician coming, showing interest and all that, right? And being very dynamic. But there was definitely also a fear of the ego that came with it, right? Mm-hmm. And there's no doubt, I knew so many people. I tried everything, right? A lot of ego was there. So a lot of cleaning had to go on in me to reach that stage, right? So when I was introduced to heartfulness, I was very systematic. I have this academic background, right? So the first thing was to check the value system. Mm-hmm. And there were 4 things that was critical for me in the beginning. One thing, it had to be about the heart. That was already a check, right? Second thing was, it should not be a money machine.
Sure.
And it was clearly said from the beginning, we don't charge anything. Check. Third thing was about the master. Does that mean we are slaves? Are we just here to make him feel happy? But very fast I realized it's just reverse, right? He is here for his master, doing his master's work. And his master's wish is to work for us. So we are kind of his masters, you could say. But we are given what we need, right, on a spiritual journey. Not whatever we wish as a childish wish. I would want a balloon, right? But it's hollow inside. So that was also a check very fast. Then the last thing was really, really important to me. And that was this thing about power use. Because I experienced it so much in politics, maybe also, right? That people use power on you to get you to somewhere where you actually don't want to be. And you might be manipulated into a situation where suddenly you have turned on some people that are your friends also. Or that they are saying, this is for your own good. This is for your own good. And so that was critical for me. And the beauty in spirituality, which I found out very fast also, is that there can be no use of power at any stage on a spiritual journey. You cannot grow if somebody tries to force you.
Mm.
And why is that? Well, for the first thing is that when you meditate, you close your eyes. Nobody knows what's going on in there. If you are not interested, it won't be meditation also. So you won't progress also on the journey. So those 4 ticks was there, right? And then you see, there are 3 approaches in my idea to heartfulness. There's the karma way, which is practical experimentation and experiencing. There's the jhana way, which is wisdom, listening to the master, maybe exchanging opinions with the master, reading literature, seeing videos, knowledge. And then there's the bhakti way, right? The devotee way, the love relation with the master and the teacher. So I started very much out as the karma yoga, as the karma yogi, right? So that was my proof of the pudding, that if I experience, now the value system I had checked, right? So second thing is I need to experience what is going on here. And for that I also realized very fast, you need to commit yourself to this. You can't take 10% of what they suggest and expect you will experience 100%. It won't work like that. You take 10%, you might experience 2% also. You might even not be able to register it.
Sure.
So it was very clear to me, if you want to really find out what this is, and this is also a suggestion for all the audience, if you want to really find out what it is, you need to invest yourself.
Sure.
In some cases we say 6 months, right? But I think many of us, we are in 6 months, we're just getting started actually. We don't do the practice properly. We don't have the right approach or intensity. So it will take some time for us to get to that stage, right? And I was dedicated to that. I have always been dedicated to that from the very beginning, that I needed to invest myself in this. And then slowly you started seeing results, right? Like the first week I was introduced, I became a vegetarian, to give you an example.
And you've been a lifelong non-vegetarian before?
We are hardcore non-vegetarians in Denmark in general, right? If there is
From
not
a long
non-veg,
line of Vikings.
I mean, we were non-veg eaters, hardcore. And if there was no non-veg for a meal, it wasn't a meal; it was just a snack. Now, that was really the approach, right? But it was cleaned out. The interest was cleaned out.
Wow! Within a week.
Within the first week, I barely noticed it, because it just dropped off like a leaf falling from the tree, right? There is nobody shouting, now I'm falling. I mean, it's just a natural process, right? But I went to the supermarkets and I was not drawn to the coolers anymore, right? I mean, they used to lie in the cooler and say, Dan, we're over here. You like us. Yeah, and we are an offer, Dan. And we are new ones. You have to try us. It just didn't happen. I ended up in the bottom of the supermarket and there were only dal and beans. I didn't know what to do with those fellows. But that's what I ended up putting in the... See, it's not like I was repulsed by non-veg, but it's just like a flower. You don't eat a flower, right?
Yeah, sure. It's just not...
I'm not drawn to eat a flower, but I like the view of it. No, it's not. Exactly. It wasn't considered food anymore.
Wow.
And there was no rational explanation for this. Now I can tell you all the reasons, right? But so that's the first thing that dropped off. You would say that's incredibly powerful, right? Sure. We have a system that simply can alter your behavior in such a drastic way, right? For me, it didn't feel drastic, but I can assure you family members around me, when they realize I can't cook non-veg for Dan when he's visiting anymore, that was drastic for them. So many times I was eating boiled potatoes and lettuce, right? Because they didn't know what to do also, right? But I couldn't eat non-veg. And then also after some time, alcohol disappeared. We used to party Friday, Saturday. We're young people, right?
Yeah, sure.
So, but after 1.5 years, so that's 22 and a half years ago, right? Nearly 23 years ago. I haven't touched a drop of alcohol. I couldn't.
That's incredible.
The last time I drank a beer was 22 years ago, right? And I had hangovers for 3 days. And I thought, it's simply not that funny. That one beer wasn't that funny.
Yeah.
So those are the more crude, rough things that you can observe.
Manifestations.
And then, of course, there are a lot of much more subtle things, like maybe becoming more sensitive, more observant, right? And I started having that experience of love.
Mm-hmm.
And that is all, in my idea, it's all the blessing of charity. that he taught me how to develop that love. And so for me, the proof, as you can understand, the proof was to experiment, test and test and test, to experiment and see how does it actually work on you. But the thing is, that the problem is that in the beginning, I couldn't feel my heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why I joined. The first couple of years when I was doing my practice, when coming out of meditation, I thought I might as well have been meditating on my big toe because I had no clue how to connect with my heart, right? But after a lot of cleaning, suddenly I started feeling, I can feel something is being spoken here. Men det var på et sprog, som jeg ikke kunne forstå. It was in a language I didn't understand. I could hear words are being told,
Wow.
but I couldn't understand, right? So another couple of years with a lot of cleaning, and suddenly I started being able to hear what the heart suggested. And in general, it was very different than what my mind or my samskaras, you could say, the present samskaras, they were suggesting to do, right? So in the beginning, I didn't trust it, right?
Yeah,
I could understand, I could hear, I could understand, but I didn't trust, right?
sure.
So what do you do then? Yeah, well, I started experimenting again. The karma yoga again. Again, he started experimenting. Let's
Follow
try
it,
it.
not follow it.
Yeah, try
What
it.
is the result? That sort of thing.
Yeah, try it. So I had to give you one example, right? One early morning meditation. I was in construction many years, 10 years, and I finished a project and I was waiting for some land to build. So I had a year or 1.5 years. So I thought, what do you want to do? So I sent out that question to Barbody, actually. What would be spiritual supportive? What kind of job would be spiritually supportive? That's after my political activity, right?
So you started heartfulness when you were in politics,
Yeah.
and then maybe a few years down the line you quit politics?
Yeah, I started in 98, right? And at that time I had been in politics 12 years, right?
Oh, okay.
And I had different positions, but that was in the middle of the election campaign, right? So I was smack in the middle. The campaign started in 96, right? And it was supposed to end in 99, so 4 years total. And in the middle, 98, there I got, I found, or I was found, however we put it, right?
Yes.
So
And then you have this break of 1 year after your construction job, and you
I was 10 years after that. I was in construction, right?
After the politics, okay.
Yeah. And but the thing is that in this process here, when I was waiting for this land, right, I experimented if I could trust my heart, right? What happened was one early morning meditation, normal day, the word train driver came. And there was such a peace and calm on my heart, I could hardly remember. And then when I came out of the meditation, my ego was in a complete state of shock. Train driver! You never spoke about trains. You're not interested in trains. Train driver! So I just left it, right? And then 2 days later, again in the morning meditation, again the word train driver was mentioned. And this time when I came out of the meditation, the ego was much better prepared. And it just listed up a long of really, really valid counters. I mean, like, you know so many people and you lose all your contacts and all the knowledge you have built. It will be wasted if you go this way. You'll sit all alone up in the front of a train. Nobody will even see you.
Wow.
And I mean, it will be very difficult for you then, because you have no interest in any kind of cars or bikes or trains. You will have no interest in anything of this, right? You don't have any experience with these things.
It's a dream job for kids, but
It never was for me.
Wow.
I mean, but I knew my heart had spoken. So I applied. There was an education. And I went through there was a lot of tests psychologically and physical eye test, whatnot they tested, right? And then I was hired to do the training for 9 months. A lot of stop tests on the way, right? Obviously, because you take responsibility for a lot of human life,
so many
right?
people,
Yeah, you do.
Absolutely.
So you have to be really sharp and know what you do, right? But I passed it all, and why? I mean, how was that spiritual? It's difficult to say, but I was in nature, right?
Wow.
95% of the time I was just in nature. I had the best office in the city, right? Because night or day or any season, I was outside, right? And
you had a window seat.
Yeah. I was simply in nature, right? I had amazing experiences with animals and with nature and the beauty of it, right? So maybe that's what I needed, I can't say.
And what was the routes you were applying on? The
I
trains?
drove in Sjælland, where the capital is lying, and basically I checked out where is the least risk for a suicide attempt in front of the train, because unfortunately some people use
Sure.
trains to kill themselves, right?
Sure.
And obviously in the capital, that's the worst place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our teachers used to say it's not a question if, it's a question when you will experience it.
Mm-hmm.
And that I knew that I will probably never be able to forgive myself, because no matter if I had a choice or not, I would always blame myself.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't you pull the brake, or something you will always come up with, right? So I knew for my samskaras it was important to drive a place. So I chose a small place down south. And it was just like it was like a triangle. It was just 50 kilometers one way, going back 50 kilometers. Total, it was just the longest stretch was like 50 kilometers.
Oh,
So it's
nice.
just bing, 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 going back and forth there, right, until there was an opportunity to move to the Danish ashram. You see, some of us on the way, right, we get doubts about the journey we are on, right? So what do we do then? How do you go through that doubt? So my approach was always try to take it to the next level. Try and shift to a higher level and see what happens here. What do I mean by higher level? In this case here, I decided to apply to move to the ashram and work as a full-time volunteer there. But it can be going now. We have Bandara coming up. It can be to go to a Bandara. It can be to sign up for some volunteer work. It can be to take some initiative to present heartfulness somewhere, right? Take some responsibility in the center, practical, clean, whatever. Try to take your involvement to the next level. If you can do it spiritually, I mean, if you can increase the intensity, nothing like it. But for me, it had to be tangible. I need to have a physical proof that now I have taken it to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
Shifting to India was also that. Coming from Chennai to Hyderabad was also that. Shifting to Kanha was also that, right? It's taking it to the next level. So whenever you have doubt, that is my solution. Take it to the next level, and then you see what happens.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the job as a train driver lasted how many years?
Yeah, but it didn't last long. I think I started 9 months. I think I only drove 7 months.
Oh,
because
nice.
then there was an opportunity to shift to the ashram.
Oh, and then you shifted to
Yeah, there was some leadership change in the Danish mission at that time. And then when I was traveling to India, in those days I traveled every 3 months, stayed 1 month in India. So I asked Charity if I could shift there, and he said, why not? So I came home and informed the people that I'm shifting now. I have taken permission. If it's fine with you, I'll come.
And how did the family react? Were they?
No, I didn't have family, right? So in the sense that I was on my own, I sold a flat and lost a lot of money because of the housing situation at that time, right? But I also realized I cannot wait for these things, If I had kept the flat, I might have not lost that half crore, right? But I could not put my life on hold because of money.
Sure.
So I sold it, took a huge loss, but I shifted to the ashram. And again, it's about take it to the next level, whatever it is for you. If you have doubts or you feel it's not as intense as it used to be.
But with each of these shifts, most of us, I'm speaking for myself, actually. I say most of us, but I'm speaking for myself. I would be extremely fearful too, because it's like a leap of faith, really, that you are listening to the voice of the heart, applying for a train driver's job, quitting the political scene completely, of which you had invested a lot of your life in the political scene. And then listening to your heart again and shifting to this heartfulness center, RATS, and being there. Were there doubts? How did you manage? Was there any fear that I may be doing the wrong thing? This may not be the path?
But you see, first step was to learn to listen to my heart. Once I could hear my heart, I needed to understand what is it telling. Third step was to trust that you can, if you do it, like becoming a train driver, it was very different than anything I could have imagined. Was it bad? No, it wasn't. It was very different, and in that sense, it was kind of exciting, you could say. Try something, go out of your comfort zone, Try something new. See what other aspects, and that's what I'm working with nowadays also when I'm working on memory and concentrating and learning, right? I'm trying to teach people, how do you find a version of yourself where you use all aspects and you use your strength to its limits. And so for me, the fourth step was, you can hear the heart. You understand what it says. You trust it. But now you have to act on it, right? Because tomorrow, that is there also, right? But you need to have that courage to take that fourth step also to act on it, right?
Yeah, because you could be listening to the heart and it could be giving you very good suggestions. But if you're not listening to it,
it's not practical.
And if you're not doing,
it's not practical, right?
Yeah. Talk sensibly.
Next year, definitely. Next year. No, so that was the challenge I gave myself, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing you could say that I had asked maybe 15 years ago. I was sitting in a meditation in Vasane, in that ashram I spoke about in Denmark. And the thought was, how do I show my surrender? Because the first 7 years I just tested and tested and tested and tested until I didn't know what more to test, actually. And then I had that feeling, the next 1 year, Charity, you decide. After 7 years, don't take that long. That's what. Don't be as slow as me, right? But that was needed for me. So I had that thought, okay, how to show my surrender. And at the time, because I'm a karma yogi, right? I am a practical fellow. It has to be tangible. And my thought was, the most intervening thing in my life would be if he chose my wife. At that time, I couldn't imagine anything more, anything bigger in my life, life-changing, right? So I went to him and I asked him directly. Again, I put myself on the spot. The message has come directly. I went to the cottage where he was. As soon as he came out, I asked him, will you find a wife for me? And he patted me on the shoulder and said, when you're ready. And I said, I'm ready. But of course, when he says you're not ready, I was not ready, right? So 6 years ago, I was called here to Kanha, right? And I was told there's a girl here. I want you to meet Master Ask, right? So I came in the morning and I was told, now you sit with the girl. In the evening, you come to Daddy, to Master. And then you decide, what are you up to? So I spent half a day on the Babaji statue in the shade with the girl, which I didn't know at all, right? We came in the cottage in the evening and Master closed his eyes. Then I also closed my eyes. I just felt he connected hers and my heart. And then I asked him if he had any recommendations for marriage. And he gave a few suggestions. One thing was about faith. Another thing was not expecting perfection. And that was kind of it. Then we walked out. I didn't know if the girl was interested at all. I think she was a little overwhelmed because I was a foreigner and all that, right? She was a Telugu Hyderabad girl, right?
And was language an issue? I mean...
Yeah, when I came, I brought a friend. I didn't know what language she spoke, right? In case she was speaking Telugu, I brought a friend that could translate. Luckily, it wasn't necessary. But I didn't know, right? So I had a few criteria to marry the girl. Obviously, it had to be Master's choice. Second, the girl had to accept.
Sure.
Which is a little critical also. But I also needed the parents to give the blessing. Because I've seen here in India, a couple of my people I know, they suffered so badly.
Yeah, when they went on disharmony.
When they went on with marriage and the parents didn't accept. So much pain it gave. So I also gave that criteria. So we met on a Sunday. Wednesday, I went and met her parents. And I thought I would be thoroughly grilled, right? 7 generations back. What all have you been up to? What are your ancestors? And all those things. But they were very sweet. They're not Abhyasis, the parents, right?
Wow.
They were not Abhyasis. I think the only question they ask where the father asked where you're going to settle. So from the day we met till we were married, that took 15 days, right?
Wow.
But again, you were talking about courage, right? What made you do that change? It didn't feel like that for me. It's just like you read a book, right? And you'll flip the page.
Wow.
You don't blow the trumpet, dot, 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 dot. Now we're going to another page. No, that's just, you flip the page, that it's over that chapter. Now you go to this chapter. It's just like that.
Wow.
But I think that is, I guess, I hope, that's the heart directing me. I hope that's because it just feels right. It just feels right? So
Incredible, because the Western world always talks about how weird the arranged marriage situation in India is, but here you are, you put yourself in that position, you put yourself in a position to have an arranged marriage, which is what brings me to this next thing that I wanted to ask you, which is, in the Western world, the idea of surrender. You mentioned surrender, and the your life is kind of almost an exploration of the term. How much do you surrender? And it's actually a very negative word in the West. A surrender is not the right thing to do. You fight the good fight and that sort of thing. But and especially surrendering, when you have also a human figure associated with it. Of course, the master, when we meditate, we realize that it's much more than just a human figure. It's something that is a quality that is beyond description in a way. But allowing another human that sort of control in your life is something that people are not very comfortable with. And I'm sure you weren't to begin with. I'm sure if we met Dan as a young teenager, he would balk at the idea of, having someone decide who he's going to marry, having someone decide where he's going to settle.
That was unimaginable. I mean, if I tell this story to my Danish friends, right, they will think, are you mad? And maybe I am, but it works really nice for me.
How does one start on this journey? I mean, in the sense that I cannot possibly do this, because a lot of people may have an opportunity to start on a journey of spirituality, but there is that immediate judgment that, this means I'm giving up my personality in a way and going to hand over control to someone else.
Yeah.
How do you get over that?
Yeah, you can definitely have that approach, but you can ask yourself one question. If you want to be really good at something, what is the shortest route?
To find a teacher.
If you want to be in any given thing in school, can you imagine to learn in school without a teacher? If you want to be good at it, you need a teacher. You want to be good in sports? You want to be good in music? Sure. I mean, anywhere there are teachers involved, right? So do you want to be good to follow your heart or grow spiritually? It's just a question you have to ask yourself. Do you want to be good at it? Or do you want to experiment alone endlessly and go into labyrinth after labyrinth, not going anywhere, just maybe circling in your life also? I think it's that simple a question. I had this, when I read, in the very beginning, when I read the book My Master, I thought it's the most beautiful book I have ever read, because it was a pure love declaration from Charity to Babaji, from the third master to the second master when he met him the first time, right? And when I saw a quotation Babaji has given, that the Westerners always try to find out, who am I? They're always asking this question and trying to explore, who am I? And he said, forget yourself and remember him who is all. And those two things, there is such a purity and a beauty in those statements in my idea. So I have something inside me which is drawing me towards that kind of surrender, you could say. But the journey I took, in the beginning, they are telling that the connection with the master is critical, right? And I'm a karma yogi, so I will experiment. So I really wanted to be a bhakti yogi, right? I'm telling you, the beauty I could feel in the love declaration in My Master and in the statement that Babaji gave, right? It was so appealing to me. I had no clue how to do it, though. So when I read My Master, I read that Charity looked in Babaji's eyes, and he looked into infinity. So there was a stage there where I thought, it will come through the eyes. I just have to stare at him. So in Manapakam, if there was a concert, finally Charity came out, everybody would turn towards the stage and look at the musicians or the dancers. I would sit ulta. I would sit the other way and stare at Master, like a fish swimming against the stream. And now you could think, how rude. I mean, how could you do it? Didn't you feel embarrassed about yourself? No, that was the goal, right? Why will you swim this way if the goal is there?
I hope you didn't go up on stage and sit next to the musicians.
Once in Gayatri, in Charity's home in Chennai, we were a few handful of people that were waiting for him. He came out after an afternoon nap and sat on his swing. He was a little beside himself right after just waking up. And I was just sitting there and staring at him. And he said, "What are you looking at?" And I said, "My master." And then poor thing, what can he say? I mean, he can't discourage me from that silly route. I had to find out myself, right? So 1.5 years, actually, I was like that until something struck me. How rude you are.
So it's 1.5 years of staring at the master.
I stared. Why did I stare? Yeah, because I read in the book, right?
Sure.
It came through the eyes. I thought it's the souls that meet, right?
Sure.
But then I understood the term constant remembrance, right? I came across that. Remembrance, that's something with the brain, right? I thought. So it's something about keep thinking about him. But very soon I realized I can't do that, because if I think here, my mind will also jump there. If I'm there, the mind will also... It was just jumping around, right? Mm-hmm. So it was not on one track, my mind. So I realized this is not going to work, right? So what is constant remembrance then? Yeah, it's a feeling, right? It's a feeling of love. And those that you love, your mother or sister or brother or your spouse or your children, you don't need to do any efforts to remember them, right? Maybe especially if you fall in love with a boy or a girl, right? You are intoxicated completely, right? So I realized it has to come through the heart somehow, right? It has, again, come back to the heart, right? It has to be a love relation, a love journey you take with the master, right? But how can you love an old Indian that you don't know anything about, right? Again, experiment. I just started observing him, following him, asking him, and testing and testing and testing, and seeing, is he a master? And once I realized he is a master, the second question is that, is he your master? Is it my master? And that too, very, very fast, I realized, yeah. After 7 years, just right. Yeah, he's my master. So the trust is there. At some stage, the love feeling might come in glimpses, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not a steady state, right? But at some stage, it was more like being able to tune myself into his presence, I would call it. If I was able to feel him, even if I was not there in the beginning, right? See, I told you in the beginning I couldn't feel my heart, right? Mm-hmm. Then how can my meditations be effective? Again, I tried to experiment. I read somewhere in the literature, Babaji said, if it comes naturally, you can meditate on the whole physical form of the master, the whole form of the master. So I thought, this is obviously not working, so the Karma Yogi, he will try, what else can you do to make it work? So I tried to meditate on his physical. I just placed a photo of him. Later I removed the photo and just had the image. Later I just felt his presence, right? But what literally happened when I started meditating on his physical form, it was taking a electrical device and putting it in the plug.
Wow.
It was literally just like this, I sat straight like I was in some kind of current was flowing straight to my heart, right?
Wow.
And when the meditation was over, I kind of just sunk back in. It was so powerful for me to do that. And again, if the viewer should take any advice from this, it is, if you cannot make something work, try something else that is suggested. Don't make your own ideas, but try and follow some suggestions that are there, because we do need different ways at different times in our progress, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Sure. But that's the incredible thing about heartfulness, I think, that it gives you all these techniques and it allows you to experiment with them. there are all these set of techniques, and you test them out. And it's not that anything is being told to accept without questioning. You can question everything, and also get your answer through experimentation. So it's really very practical in that way. It's not like there's nothing like deeply secretive or mystical about it. It's in that sense. It's more. It's out there. Here is the technique. See if this works for you.
You see, my wife calls me a proof fellow. I need proofs.
Well, is she referring to the proof in the alcohol?
Yeah, but that's also a proof, right, that it didn't work for me. Yeah, but that is the karma yoga way I feel, right?
Yeah.
That you test if it works, if it doesn't work. You see, when we are talking about surrender, I had a very, very private but very powerful experience when I was 7 months into my practice. I was a candidate for the European Parliament, and the Serbs had attacked Kosovo, and they were bombing inside Kosovo, and all sorts of horrible things was going on. And I had worked in a refugee camp in Croatia when the war was going on there in 92. So I started getting the same nightmares I used to have there when the Serbs attacked Kosovo. And after 3 days and haven't slept at all, I decided I need to do something. So I took my camera. I was also a filmmaker, right, in those days. I took my camera. I spoke with all my political connections. I traveled to Italy, stayed with some political friends. I took a ship over to Albania, which was the country where nearly all the refugees poured into. And I was received by some government people with armed bodyguards and whatnot that drove me around. And they showed me a lot of the refugees that had come also to the capital. And it was horrible, horrible stories, right? Just again reminding of what's going on right now, right? In many, many places on earth, right? So I told them I want to go to the border station where they let all the refugees in.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, we can't do that, then it's simply too dangerous. But I insisted, and then I left it. And I thought, okay, it's not going to happen, right? But I was actually filming to collect money for the refugees, right? At this stage, you have to understand, this was on the third day, right? There were no medias there. Nobody was giving any attention to what was going on at that stage. It was so early in the process, right? But I couldn't sleep for 3 nights. For me, it felt like an eternity, right? So finally, they gave me a bodyguard, who was also the driver. They gave me a four-wheeler and a translator, and off we went up into the mountains. The Serbs had blocked all the border stations that was easy accessible because they were afraid Albanians would attack them. So there was only one single place up, way up in the mountains on very poor roads. So when we came up there, I got away. I mean, I left the car, right, and they told 200-300 kilometers of refugees are inside Kosovo trying to get out through this border patrol station. Mm-hmm. Right? So I've started interviewing some of the refugees coming the other way, and suddenly I had crossed into Kosovo, actually.
Oh, okay.
And I was caught from behind by 3 or 4 Serbian soldiers. And they were very agitated. And they dragged me off, took my camera, my passport, everything I had, and dragged me off into the border patrol station. And there was one guy in particular, he was shouting at me, putting his face nearly nose to nose and shouting at me, right? At this time here, NATO was bombing inside Serbia to make them move out, right?
So a very tense situation.
It was, we were enemies, right? It was, they called me a war prisoner, right? So it was extremely tense. And this fellow here, I mean, he looked like a mad dog. I mean, if you have seen a rabies dog, he had completely mad eyes, you know. I'm sure he was on drugs for one thing, when I'm also completely sure he had killed people. He was completely mad. And he was shouting at me, and NATO, NATO, I kill you. And I didn't react, right? At this stage here, you know, you have to understand, I was only 7 months Abyashi, right? But something in me, I didn't want to ask for help. But something in me just kept repeating, may the right thing happen. whatever that is. And I had no expectation. May the right thing happen in this situation. That I just kept repeating. So I didn't react to his shouting, right? Then he pulled out a knife with a blade this length here and put it on my throat. And he kept shouting, right, I'll kill you. And I didn't react to that also. And he got more and more furious, right, because I didn't respond. I was not afraid or whatever you call it. Then he took his gun out, right, and put it to my temple and showed with his own head that he would shoot me in the head, right. And that too I didn't react on. But then I turned my head and looked into the room we were inside, right, and there were 2 officers there. And when my attention moved there, he was like a balloon. All energy just left him, and he left the room then. And then they started interrogating me, these 2 officers, right? We were sitting at a table like we're sitting here. One person in front of me, he was just staring at me the whole time. He didn't say one word. He was just reading. Is this fellow lying or what? I'm sure. And then there was one guy sitting on there. He was asking all the questions, right? And I could not answer. Half of them I could not answer honestly, right? Because I would have been used in a political game, right? I would have been a hostage, right?
Being a politician in your background. No.
So, but what happened very early when we sat at the table, I felt something up. There was a wall here, right? Very close to me. And I felt something. I turned my head and I saw Charity. Not like I see you physical, right? But I guess maybe his astral body, but I saw his physical form. And I was a little embarrassed, frankly spoken, that now I had brought myself in harm's way and he had to come and pick me out. So inside me, a dialogue was going that I can handle this. I have been in much worse situations than this, which was not true, right? He didn't say anything, but he just moved inside me.
Wow.
And you can call it surrender, right? Because he took over, I felt. And so many things happened. And one of the things, he found that centenary. I don't know if you were there, but in 1999, when we had the 100-year birthday celebration of Vavudi, we got a little plastic card for those of us that signed up. And he found that in my wallet. He said, "What is this?" I said, "This is meditation." And then he said, "Maybe that's why you are so calm. But this is not meditation. This is reality."
Wow.
And the whole time, it was very, very interesting to see the behavior I had, right? Because everything was conflict resolving behavior.
Wow.
I mean, I was the underdog, right? And I said I'm just a stupid young boy that did a big mistake. I didn't admit I was in politics or knew anybody. I had to lie about that. I had met with the leader of the Kosovo Freedom Army also, right? I couldn't tell that. I mean, I had recordings in the car of interviewing freedom fighters on the way, shouting how they wanted to kill the Serbs, right? So all those things there, I couldn't tell, right? But at some stage, and I can only credit it to Charity, right? Because at some stage, it was like there was a human connection. Like we have a human connection now, right? That came with this interrogator, the guy who was sitting and asking all the questions, right? And suddenly I started asking him questions. And he felt like he had to explain. He said, "We are not so bad, 20 kilometers from the border here. We are giving bread to all the refugees." I said, "Then let's go and film it." I said, No, we can't do that. I said, "Why not? It'll take us half an hour there, half an hour back. And then you can prove what you're saying." No, that's not possible. I said, "Okay." But suddenly there was the roles was there, right? He was who he was, and I was who I was. But a human connection came in the middle of a war zone, right?
Wow.
Yeah, it was. But then at some stage I was told, "You can go now." And they had walked through all my recipes, right? That's where they found the receipts, the receipts I had, my 100 receipts I had. Everything they went through, right? And asked, "What is this? What is this? What is..." And then they said, "You can go now." And I didn't know what they were up to, right? Because they had threatened in the beginning that now you are a war prisoner and we will put you in jail for years or something like that if you don't do what we want. And I didn't, what does that mean? Do what you want? I didn't know that, right? Or else And I didn't know if that was worse, right? So he said, you can go now. And I didn't know, what does that mean? If I get up too fast, will they shoot me in the back? Or what does it mean? So I started folding every single receipt one by one while I was talking with him, showing I have no urgencies coming out of the room. I'm very comfortable here. Slowly, I was packing everything, and then I got slowly up and I left the room. In the hall, that mad rabies dog fellow, he was there, right? And I knew this is very dangerous. So I reached my hand out to that fellow and said goodbye. I wanted the rabies dog to know I'm permitted to leave, right?
Wow.
And we shaked and took the hand down. I don't know why. Immediately again, I took my hand up and I said, my name is Dan, which obviously he knew, right? Because he had my passport. And he said, now he was obliged to tell his name, right? And he didn't really want to do that, right? So he said, my name is Soran, which is a quite common name, right? And then I walked out. And a year later, when I was flying, I was visiting India, right? I was traveling with Charity, traveling with him. I was in the same flight, right? I was never one who sat on his lap much, right? I didn't have many personal interactions in that sense. But I enjoyed very much those days if you could travel with him or just sit for a satsang or whatever, right? Be in his presence. He was sitting way up front in the flight. I was on the very last row. And I had this thought that I felt he came into me. I never felt when he left me.
Wow.
And that thought came in that flight there, and I decided I'll sit and meditate and then I'll ask a question. Find the answer from inside, right? And in the meditation, I put this question. I felt when you came inside, I never felt when you left me. And the answer was, I never left you. So you didn't feel it.
Wow.
And but that was but because you asked about it has to be a practical experience with this thing about surrender, right?
Mm.
So in this situation here, does my ego want to be in charge in this situation, or will it better if I surrender to the master? Yeah, there can be no doubts, right? So you'll only surrender if it's better, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And because this situation was perhaps the worst it could get. I mean, you probably feared for your life right from the beginning. Yeah, and somebody with a knife to your throat. I mean, you fear for your life right through the situation. So,
I didn't do it in the situation, but after it kind of caught up with me, right?
Yeah.
And it was quite shaken for some time, right?
I can imagine anyone would be. Anyone would be. And as you were relating the incident, what I noticed was that the prayer that came naturally from the heart was not come and save me. It was let the right thing happen. I think that is extremely profound, that, the prayer that comes naturally from the heart is not come here and save me. It's let the right thing happen.
You see, I think this thing about expectation, right? Because now I'm very boldly sharing my experiences, right? And then some of the audience might think I also have to experience this. No, you have to experience your journey. You cannot compare. It's really important, because maybe I shouldn't have shared this also, right? Because you cannot compare your journey with anybody's journey. Your journey is unique. Your connection with the master is unique. If you want, you can also leave today. I mean, nobody is holding you back, right? Any moment you can walk out. Any moment you can also come back again. It's up to you, right?
Yeah.
But it has to be an individual journey, and you have to make your own experiences and not try to create some expectations. I'll tell you a little experience I had. It's a combination of this thing of having the courage to step up to the master, or to take the next step in your life when you feel it's right to do it, right? We were in Calcutta, traveling with Charity, right? And now again, I'm saying traveling. I was permitted once in the cottage for a short, brief talk with him, right? But it's not like I spent much time with him. I'm just in the periphery, right? Yeah. So we came to the airport. We were going back to Chennai, and he was in the VIP section. But then they called and said, now the flight is leaving. And he came out and he sat just 1 or 2 minutes with us. But then the flight was delayed, and suddenly we ended up being just 20 or 30 people, spending an hour or 1.5 hours with him. in these very uncomfortable metal chairs that we had there, right? I was sitting on the floor like 3 meters away from him, and he was sitting up on a chair, right? And then those 20, 30 people, everybody had some kind of complaint or some kind of expectation, I felt. My wife died, very sad, and my daughter is not getting married, my boy is not getting a job. I mean, it was just a request the whole time, something they wanted from him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had this feeling I wanted to make him happy. And what can I do to make him happy now? To lift I felt it was such a heavy atmosphere because of this begging or whatever you would call it. I understand how serious it was for the people and how much they wished for help. I can understand that, right? But the expectations are keeping him in a cage, right? Where he can't do what he might have to do for us, right? So I wanted just to make him happy. So I thought, tell a joke. I'll tell him a joke, right? And then at some stage it was a little quiet, and I thought, now is my time, I can move up. So I wanted to go up on the knees, right? I came a little close to him. But as soon as I got up on the knees, I was hit with some kind of fear or lack of courage, and I sat back down. And I thought, but what is this? I mean, he's sitting right there. You know, you want to be with him. What is this? Why is your courage failing you? And again, I had to make that decision with myself. Now I have to do it. I can't live with myself if I leave this without doing it. So again, I got back up on the knees, and I got very close to him, like this distance here, right? If you can see this distance, I came close to him. And I started telling this joke here. And I thought it was a hilarious joke. It was a real story also, right? Where my sister had called me a few days earlier and told that she had had a vision. I said, wow, that's fantastic, Trine. What was it about? Yeah, but she had seen that when we died, I would go to heaven, but she wouldn't. And in those days, I was a train driver there, and she was a priest, Christian priest. And I felt bad in my heart. She was my little sister, and I felt, no, that can't happen. I tried to convince her, and she was very firm. She said, no, that's how it's gonna be. I said, but how can you be so sure? She said. He said, because when I'm as a priest, I'm standing and preaching in the church about God. Everybody's just sitting and sleeping. But whereas when you drive the train in the evening, everybody is praying, God, Dan is driving tonight. Please help us. So, and of course, I felt it was so funny, right? In the meantime, while I was telling this story, I mean, Charlie just moved his head. I felt nearly like it was our noses was touching, right? And I felt it like there was a hand through his eyes that came into my chest and was doing some work inside my heart.
Wow.
And with great difficulty, I was able to keep track of the joke, right? Because you imagine somebody coming this close. And then when I was finished telling the joke, Charlie leaned back and he said, joke. And not one person laughed. Not one smile, not one laugh, nothing that could lift the situation, right? And I just sat down, right? And I was very confused about the situation, right? It was a little like a cold bucket of water, whoosh, right? Because you expected some kind of reaction. Like you were laughing a little, right? But see, again, it's about expectations, right? Because I had an expectation a certain thing would happen.
Mm.
It's not what happened at all. But the right thing happened, right? He did the work, right?
Yeah.
There's no doubt. And maybe because I was so occupied about that storytelling, I gave free passage, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't focus on having any resistance. So he was just in there and did what had to be done. And then joke, right? Next chapter.
Now, maybe you should have stood up because it's stand-up comedy. It's not kneel-down comedy.
Knee-down company, yeah.
Anyway, Dan, it's been an hour and 20 minutes that we've been chatting. And I think we can pause this session here. And I'm sure we'll sit down together again for a more deeper exploration of the spiritual journey. It's been beautiful, all that you've shared with us. It's been totally heartfelt. And it's such a joy to talk with you always. And thank you for taking the time out. And let's do this again.
And I would say to all the viewers also, thank you for your patience and thank you for your patience. And again, you just take what you can use and leave the rest, right? And don't try to compare. It's not about that. It's about finding your answers to the question that you meet on the spiritual journey. And whenever you are challenged and whenever you are in a difficult spot, how do you take it to the next level? That's really what it's all about. You have a unique soul and you have a unique journey. We all have the same goal and the same master maybe, but you have to find every step on your own.
Beautiful.
I wish you all the best with that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dan. That's a beautiful note to end on. Thank you.
So that was my conversation with my dear brother Dan. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. To hear more such conversations, please subscribe to this channel, and also you can find us on Spotify on the KanaCast channel. That is KANHACAST. Thank you for listening. This is Hill Dog signing off. Woof woof.